What's going on, folks? Zeke here with an amazing unboxing video, and I'm not talking about good old Smiley Market. What I'm talking about is a device that was sent to me over 3 weeks ago almost. Now, this was sent to me by Jeremiah of all trades, and big shout out to him. Dude, he sent me the device with everything that a newbie like me in cybersecurity needs to get started with this device. Now, truth be told, I am very new to the field of radio frequency, but oh my gosh, over the last 3 weeks, I have been studying the capabilities of this device, the things that I can learn from this device, and I'm finally unboxing it for you guys. I'm going to show you guys how to set this thing up, how to add a little bit of customization flair to it, and also what I plan to use this device moving forward with the channel. Specifically, the first problem that I need to solve is this thing sucks because you have to spam click it all the time, but hopefully with this device, we can test out the signal that this thing is outputting. We'll probably break this thing open and hopefully fix that ourselves. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get to the desk and unbox this thing for you.
Get over here!
All right, folks, so if you haven't guessed it already, we are going to be doing some work with the PortaPack H4M flashed with Mayhem onto it. Now, obviously, it's not going to come in this fancy 3D printed case. If you are interested in purchasing this device, which is also linked below for you, it's going to come in the original packaging. Once you open it, please don't throw your soft inserts away. I'm saying that because if you navigate to the printables link, a designer by the name of Zulu Archangel actually designed this case, which fits those inserts perfectly. So let's go ahead and turn this to the side. I'm gonna stop talking for a little bit and let you guys enjoy this unboxing. Ooh. All right, here we go. And I added a little bit of Zeek flair to it, but
dang, that thing looks good. Yes, sir.
Woo! Yes, sir. So as you can see, we got the soft shell insert. I did some trimming for the antenna that Jeremiah sent me, so this one would fit. But I put a little bit of Zeek flair onto it. Now, if you're not familiar with this comic, this is part of the DC52 collection. I know nobody's a fan of DC52, but anyways, what came of it was the Batwing line. Now, Batwing starts off as a cop in Africa, I want to say, but that dude gets super burnt out from the criminals he has to face. He ends up hanging up the flag and then passing the torch on to Lucius Fox's son, which is super cool. So that's a little bit of history of some random comic books. Now, let's get this guy out the case. All right, let's put that to the side. Awesome case. All right, so before we actually have to crack this thing open and get it ready to flash, let's talk a little bit more about the H4M PortaPack. So this device is something that you would purchase if you're interested in studying and analyzing almost every single wireless signal that we have on this earth. So I'm talking about garage door remotes, car key fobs, Bluetooth, airplane signals, radio stations, satellites, you name it. Now, the way that it actually works is by something called software defined radio, or SDR. So that means that this is primarily controlled by the software that is flashed onto it as opposed to fixed hardware. Now, the HackRF hardware can actually send and receive signals from 1 megahertz all the way up to 6 gigahertz, which actually covers a huge part of the radio spectrum. So the PortaPack H4M is actually a portable radio lab in your pocket, and that is because of the two companies that are actually behind it. So the HackRF side, which is the radio hardware made by Great Scott Gadgets, designed by Michael Osman, which is an open source SDR device used by researchers, hackers, and engineers alike. The other side of this amazing device is the PortaPack, which is an add-on board that provides the screen, the controls, the buttons, a battery, and an SD card. Now, this version is the newest design made by OpenSourceSDRLab, which improved things like the USB-C charging, screen quality, and controls. Now, since this is a SDR, we need to talk about the firmware. So, what is Mayhem? Mayhem is a custom firmware that runs on the PortaPack. Think of it like installing custom firmware on a gaming console to unlock more features. This adds tons of tools such as signal scanning, recording radio signals, replaying signals, decoding wireless protocols, and spectrum analysis. All right, so going over the external hardware that we can see on the device, on the right side we have our power button, on the left side we have a external mic button, in the middle we have our 3.5-inch screen, on the very bottom we have our headphone jack, and if I flip this around so that we can get a better understanding of these two ports, you can see that we have a clock in and a clock out port. So for clock in, we would use this to support a more accurate clock time for the device as opposed to the internal timing source. For clock out, we would use this to send the PortaPack's clock signal out to other devices. Now, like I said, not too well versed in that, and I'll probably update you when I find a need to hook up to these ports. But if we go to the front or top portion, you can see that we have our SMA antenna port, and then we actually have two buttons and our SD card slot above it. So for the middle button, that is actually, for the middle button, that is actually our DFU button, and on the very bottom is our reset button. Now I'm going to go ahead and separate these two halves so that we can prepare our device for flashing. Alright, so I got super scared when I separated my two halves and heard that pop, but I went ahead and checked the pins and all the other components. Everything looks to be in tip-top shape. The thing that we need to flash Mayhem onto our device is the HackRF board. Now, if you do want to proceed with this, by all means just be careful when you separate these two halves. But let's go ahead and get back to the computer, and I'll show you guys how to flash Mayhem onto this, as well as all the other steps that you'll probably have to cover when using a Mac. So moving over to the software side, this might look overwhelming, but we're going to go through this step by step. And I actually went through this guide referencing Jeremiah of all trades update firmware with the Mac video. So I'll go ahead and leave that linked below, as well as a lot of the other creators that I use referencing getting my PortaPack stood up. Let's go ahead and go over step one. For Mac, you want to make sure that you download and install Xcode. Alright, so installing Xcode was extremely lengthy, but we are moving on to the next step. So the next thing you want to do is head over to a search bar or any type of search engine, and you just want to search for installing Brew on a Mac. So once you find the link for the missing package manager for Mac OS, you're going to copy the install Homebrew command, paste, and depending if you get feedback or not, there might be some extra steps. Let's go ahead and run it. It's going to ask for your password. Press enter. We're going to wait for that to download. Alright, so let's go ahead and clear. Alright, so we're going to check the install to see if we get feedback. And the way that we do that is brew doctor. Alright, so we got some feedback and a few warnings. A newer command line tool release is available, so it looks like we need to update command line tools. And it looks like we need to fix our path. Alright, so to fix our path, and I'll go ahead and leave this linked for you, but I'm going to copy, paste this command. Alright, and so the reason why we're doing this is because the Mac is prioritizing Apple's built-in tools over Hombrew's version, and we want Homebrew to win that fight. So let's go ahead and press enter. The next thing we need to do is update our command line tools. And let's go with this command right here. It's going to ask for a password. Alright, so as you can see, after those two commands, we reran Brew Doctor, and all it says now is your system is ready to brew. Alright, so the next command, we're going to navigate to brew install DFU, and that is simple enough to copy and paste here. Alright, we're going to let that download. That was quick. Alright, and then our next step, we're going to go to the HackRF Homebrew, and this command is super simple. Still going to copy and paste though, because I already got it up. Alright. And the next portion, we want to download our firmware and the copy for our SD card. So as you can see, they're in my downloads folder, so I'm going to go ahead and unzip the firmware. The next thing that we want to do is go to our terminal and CD into the Mayhem firmware. So let's see, no such file. Okay, we need to go to downloads. So CD downloads. Okay, CD paste. Alright, so now we are in our firmware folder. Alright, and then we're going to CD. Alright, then we're going to CD once more to get into our utils folder. So CD utils. Alright, okay, so let's see. Now that we are in our utils folder. Okay. Alright, so now what we're going to do is grab our board, our HackRF board. We're going to plug it in with the USB-C data cable, and then we are going to do a series of things. We could plug it in and hopefully we get the lights that we want, or you might have to hold down the DFU button and plug it in, or plug in then hold down the DFU button. So we'll see how that goes. Alright, so now that we are approaching some of the last few steps for flashing the firmware, let's go ahead and do what I should have done in the beginning. Let's go ahead and leave a star for all the contributors and devs that made this firmware happen. And then we're going to actually make sure that in terminal, we want to make sure that we are in the Mayhem Firmware directory. And then as you can see in my downloads, I do also have the firmware folder open. So heading back to the Mayhem Firmware GitHub page, we're going to scroll to the bottom and click on documentation. And then we are going to go to firmware update procedure. Then we're going to find Windows, Linux, we need Mac. All right, so Mac. If necessary, install HackRF tools. We did that. We're going to connect our device. Switch to HackRF mode via the on-screen option in the PortaPack. All right. Upload the firmware. Okay, so we are going to be using the PortaPack Mayhem firmware bin, I believe. So what we want to do is let's go ahead and copy from HackRF _ spyflash TACW, paste, and then we're going to copy the name of the PortaPack Mayhem firmware bin. Paste. All right, and then we are actually going to plug in our HackRF board. So let's see, without holding any buttons. Okay. And we do have our lights on. You can barely see it, but we do have our lights on already. So let's go ahead and run the command. Okay, and it is writing. And it's complete. Easy does it. Alright, so we have 2 more tasks to complete before we start troubleshooting the gate remote. So in the beginning, you saw me download the copy to SD card folder. So what you're going to do now is insert your micro SD card into your card reader, then plug that into your Mac. Disk utility, spotlight search, disk utility. Okay, PortaPack. So as you can see, it's empty, but just so you guys can see what it looks like, I'm going to erase. I'm going to leave this as PortaPack, leave the format as exFAT. Okay, now that is done. So now we're going to bring up our downloads folder again. Let's open up another tab. If you haven't already, you can go ahead and unzip that compressed file. We're going to open the copied SD card file. Then scroll down. We're going to hit Command A. And then we're going to drag everything over to our micro SD card. I'm going to let that download. Alright, well that certainly took forever. Alright, so we're going to be setting up our custom splash image. As you can see, I have my Spectrum Surfer PNG already created. I'm going to be using photop.com. So the first thing we want to do is create our canvas. Then we're going to set it to 240 by 304. And let's give it a black background. Create. We're going to drag and drop our image. We're going to click free transform so we can stretch this out. All right, let's go ahead and sharpen this a little bit. Let's go filter, sharpen. Let's see what the edges look like too. Okay, I think that's pretty cool. I don't want it to be too purple. Let's set one more. Let's see. Other, sharpen render, no distort 3D. Oh, that's about it. All right, let's do unsharp mask. Let's do 80, and let's do 4. Okay. All right. So that's where the purple starts to pop, and I think we should just leave it like that. It looks pretty retro to me, and I think it's gonna look really good on the PortaPack. So let's go ahead and export. And we want to export as export as BMP. All right, let's do Spectrum Surfer. All right. So as you can see, we have our Spectrum Surfer BMP. I'll go ahead and save this. All right, so now we need to place this into our micro SD card, and I forgot to plug this back in because this is like my 3rd time trying to do this. Uno momento, porfa. All right, so we want to, let's go ahead and create. Let's go ahead and minimize this. Let's go ahead and open another tab. All right, so in our PortaPack micro SD card, we want to go to splash. All right, and that's it. And now we can get ready for our first boot. So let's go ahead and eject and go back to the desk. All right, so based off of one of my favorite animes right now, I've always wanted to do this bit when putting something back together. So with a little help from CapCut Magic, Ironara. All right, and just like that, we are back at square one. We can boot this thing for the first time and hopefully do some troubleshooting on that crappy gate opener. All right, so as you can see, we have a beautiful stand that was designed by Snorin himself. I'll go ahead and leave that linked in the description below, as well as his videos on the PortaPack. Now, we are going to boot this thing for the first time, but I can't stress to you enough, the way that you charge this device, it actually has to be powered on, so keep that in mind. You want to make sure that the battery is fully charged whenever you're using this thing. So let's go ahead and get the first boot.
Wow.
Oh, that thing looks sick. So as you can see, I did some changes to the design. I just wanted some more colors to pop. But this thing looks super sick. So let's go ahead and go to the drop-down camera and we can hopefully try to see what's going on with this guy. Alright, so this by no means is a proper demo for the amazing features that this device has, but we're going to head over to our main menu, then tap on Looking Glass. Alright, so as you can see, I am on the key fobs preset, but what I am trying to show you is how the Looking Glass will pick up the signal broadcasted by the remote once I click it. So, alright, so over on the right side, I don't know if you guys can see it, but there is a random red line that'll pop up, and that is actually me holding down the remote key. Now, as you can see, I got my gate remote open, and honestly, I already found the problem. If you can see close up, the connection pins for the battery are actually very obscured and pushed out, bent out. And if I click the button, you can see that it is working intermittently, and I truly believe it's because of this point right here. Alright folks, that's going to do it for today's video. If you guys enjoyed this beginner's guide on how to use a Mac to set up your PortaPack H4M, please leave a comment in the comment section below. I really enjoy your feedback. Alright, so some things you can expect coming to the channel. Obviously, I'm going to do a follow-up video with all of the applications and services in depth on my PortaPack H4M. We do also have 2 amazing war drivers coming in the mail, hopefully going to grace the channel and this desk very soon. But aside from that, I really appreciate you guys rocking with me. My name's Zeke, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.